Okay, loved this conversation. Loved.
Cannot wait for you to hear the person that we interviewed on this podcast today. So we interviewed Robbie Bent from Othership. And if you don't know what Othership is, let me tell you that it's not what you think it is. And that's probably the best introduction I could give to this podcast. So,
well said.
Without further ado, and enjoy the podcast and let us know what you think.
You're going to think it's amazing. Enjoy.
Hey everyone, it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in Good Co, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hello.
Robbie, you're like, wait, what's going on? Welcome
Here
to
we are.
the podcast.
Very excited to have you on, Robbie.
Absolutely.
So Robbie, just to introduce, is the founder of Othership, but I feel like you really should introduce yourself because it's so much more than that. And I've had a chat with you and came away super inspired. And I'd love for you to tell everyone like kind of what you're building before we get into many more questions that we have.
Yeah, it's like really evolved over time, just based on personal passion. So what's super unique about Othership is it's two couples and a best friend. And so I think it's the only company to my knowledge that's been co-founded by two couples. And it started legitimately in like, it was a garage. So it's not even like the startup started in the garage, like it was the garage. And so it was just us trying to build a healthy community in our neighborhood, looking for people who were interested in socializing without alcohol. And so every day we would have these ice baths in my backyard and it was free. Like come one, come all. You could come on a residential street, open the gate, go in. There was like a WhatsApp QR code. You would take a picture and join. And then you're in this WhatsApp and people would just start self-organizing cold plunge days. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going Tuesday, 4 p.m. And I would just come outside my house and friends would be there. We'd be having coffee and every night we'd have a fire going and towels. And it was just this like way to make friends in the community. And that just through word of mouth grew to over 300 people. And from there, as it got colder, people didn't want to just cold plunge, in the middle of winter in Canada. So we looked at, I had this garage that was just like a woodworking studio. And so we kind of went in and myself and my partners, we just by hand built out a sauna ice bath space, like, was unpermitted at the time. It was just the idea was like, could this be something cool for the neighborhood? This was prior to COVID and it legitimately grew into 1,000 members. At first it was by donation, then we put up a little like mind body link to book. And in that space, the idea for Othership was born. And, the thing that makes Othership like really what our signature is these emotional wellness classes that you took part in. It's the first in the world to really have full scale cinematic theater produced in like a sauna and ice bath environment. And how that started was, I struggled with drugs and alcohol, and was why we wanted to build a social, healthy community in the first place was because I was struggling with like I used to own nightclubs. I didn't want to be in alcohol environments. It took me a long time to get sober. And I used a lot of, meditation retreats and Tony Robbins and Landmark and Hoffman and therapy and group therapy and psychedelic medicine, all the different like personal things to get sober. And so in that garage space, we started combining a lot of elements of those just to get people to talk about their feelings and kind of feel into their bodies. And so it was like, in the ice bath, the very first class we had is people are like, what is it? Like, now it's like become so popular. People are copying and like also trying to create classes. But it was at the time, people were like, what are you talking about? Like, even for listeners who've never heard, they're like, what do you mean a class in a sauna? And how it started was just on a Valentine's Day. 3 couples were using the space and my partners, Harry and Amanda, were like, okay, let's do an eye gaze in the ice bath. And like, we went 2 at a time. And at that point, no one was doing 2 at a time. It was just like a solitary, biohacky health and wellness inflammation thing. And so we did 2 at a time, eye gazing, come out, give each other a hug as a couple. Then we go in the sauna and you do like a guided massage on your partner and then share about your first date. And it was just like a way to connect 3 couples. And, 2 of the couples are crying and we're like, whoa, there's like something really here. And that's kind of how the classes were born, or this idea for the classes. And so maybe I'll stop there and I can, dive into whatever part or like what happened from there. But that's the origin story. It was like a backyard, cold plunging, garage, all just like, watching our customers trying to build community that kind of led to the formation of Othership.
That's amazing. Amazing. And it makes so much sense. And just to tell everybody kind of how we got to be on this conversation, we went to Othership. I think it was through a recommendation of somebody that recommended to Chris. We love to do experiences, do a lot of like I'm very into journey work and trying like the latest, whatever it is, and really pushing to do kind of all the experiences that you mentioned just to kind of like better myself personally. And so we went and had this experience. And I think it was very early. It was a little bit cold. And as soon as we walked in, I think we talked about this on a previous pod, as soon as we walked in, you could tell the authentic enthusiasm in the people there that were just checking us in. And it's early, like we're on our second cup of coffee. Like I don't expect people to be like super jovial, but they were so passionate about, you're experiencing this for the first time. I'm so excited for you. And you could really feel that. And then going through to the towels and how in rhythm and in sync, and again, how heartfelt he was singing, like just really captured the authenticity and the connection point through this experience, which I'd never experienced in that environment. And it's really beautiful.
No, thanks for sharing. I mean, it's always great that you can take something that was in a backyard and then scale it to like the city of New York and have that same empathy and excitement in your staff. It just like really makes me feel like I love hearing these stories. I could hear them all day long. And I think it's, people are really excited about like in a class, there might be 30% of people that cry, like somebody, and we'll really lean into that. Like we're trying to bring hospitality to wellness in a way that it hasn't traditionally been done. If you think of the traditional like boutique fitness or gym experience, we're trying to take something from high-end retreats, the way those make you feel, something like an experience you'd have at the Amman, for example, or Canyon Ranch, and like trying to bring that into an accessible like wellness experience in the city. So we really take hospitality seriously. Like we have something called the Daily Happy, and all our staff get emailed a transformational story every day. So all the time people will reach out and say like, I came off SSRIs, like, doing the cold plunge at home on your app was what led me to leave my house the first time during COVID. We had a couple of weeks ago, somebody had actually proposed to their partner in Othership. And so they reached out to us. He said he wanted to do it. And so we like legit had a videographer come in, film him why he wanted to do it, then like hide in like, and then planned out the whole thing. And so they did the love and kindness class together, where there's like looking into each other's eyes as part of the meditation. And then, everyone comes back in the change room. The guide goes and gets them. It's like, hey, we have something for you in the tea room. Guide scurries off. There's a cameraman hidden behind the curtains. And he, gets down on one knee and proposes. And then even as part of the proposal, he's like, hey, do you know what the Othership name means? And he's like, yeah, it's all about like taking a journey. And he's like, I want you to take a journey with me for the rest of our life, which is like in the video, which is amazing. And then we filmed them after, and she was talking, saying, during the eye gaze, this is crazy because I was just imagining like eye gazing with you like 60 years from now. So I can't believe you asked me to marry you. And like, that's a story we'll then spend a lot of time and effort to enable and then share and ensure that staff knows like, this isn't a sauna place. It's a place where people care enough to get engaged. And I think that is like, I'll spend like unlimited amount of effort and dollars on trying to make some type of special experience for the guest happen that is shareable. Because I think it creates that ripple effect of like, yes, we're actually changing lives here. So it's cool that it makes me so happy to hear that you had that experience.
Yeah. Where do you think that commitment to like, because I think that's something that most brands, like they do it very transactionally, right? Like it's like, we're going to create this experience so that, it's a little bit more thought through, whereas what you're kind of describing feels very, very emotional. And where do you think that like comes from? Like, is that from the work that you've done, or is it your partner? Like, how do you like come to that commitment? Because that's hard for brands to do, I think, to like get that.
I think it's just how the service was born and the experience was born. Like it wasn't started as a business. It was started as like, hey, let's build a healthy community around this experience. It is like core to our DNA. So my first date was actually at a bathhouse, and my wife had heard about ice baths on Rhonda Patrick, and she knew I was sober. I just started my sobriety journey and was like, let's go try this bathhouse. And so we went to the outskirts of town, and like the first time we're in an ice bath, we have no phone, we have this amazing date. And then it was something we did every single week for years. And then we did it with my best friend together. And, we lived in Berlin, we lived in San Francisco, we lived in all these places, and we'd always go to bathhouses. So we traveled to, Japan and Thailand, and probably been to like 70 plus. was also where we got engaged in the garage space. Actually, like I, took one of the sauna ice balls that you saw, put a ring in the middle. My wife was giving me a massage, melted it into her hands. It was the place where my
Oh my
co-founder,
God, I love it.
they have
So
they
good.
have like an island called like Othership Island, working name, but so it's been in the family for a long time, and they had a sauna on that island, and that's how they got inspired. So they actually they didn't know it was a business either. They just loved the sauna on that island so much. They went to Europe and trained for months to become sauna masters. And then we met and, built this thing together. But it's like in our DNA, these like creating these transformative experiences for people. And it comes like, I was a hardcore addict and like my life was ruined. I was living in my parents' basement at 30. I've lost my company. I was alone. It was just really challenging. And so I had to piece all these things together to like change my life. And luckily I had a partner. And so there's like a huge goal around how do you get people in the mainstream environment. If you say to people like meditation, retreats, psychedelics, it could be like scary, expensive. They might roll their eyes. We're very careful with our language. Like every one of those classes is scripted, and you'll never hear us say like a chakra or spirituality. You can have those experiences, but in our language, we're very tight on like this is science backed and it's emotionally driven. So our, the themes are inner power, gratitude, loving kindness. They are feelings that everybody can identify. And so we're very careful not to go too far into like the woo-woo land because we want it to be so accessible to everyone without turning people off. And why is because a lot of my friends, like, I started doing this stuff and they're like, I could never do a 10-day meditation retreat, but like, you seem so happy. I would never go to psychedelics. It's too scary. So it was like, how do you sell something to somebody that doesn't know they need it? And so the average person, 30 to 40, it's like, okay, I have 2 kids. I'm not making enough money. I'm on my phone all day. I hate my job. I'm ordering Uber Eats. I'm not as healthy. I'm at my computer. That's like normal life now. But if I said, hey, are you unhappy? You're probably like, no, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm fine. Things are fine. This is life. So you don't like, what are you selling? And so we wanted to create this like Trojan horse container where you come in because it looks cool and it feels cool. And you've heard about hot and cold. It makes you feel good. But then beneath, there's like this really deep emotional programming. And I think it changes lives. I think it helps people. Like this 90% of our people are, corporate professionals, moms, parents, and they come to this thing. They don't know they need it. They feel it. And they're like, oh my God. And so I think there's just so much desire to create something that can have lasting impact on people through taking all this work and like personal growth we've done and like try to make it accessible for the first timer. And then the other hole, which we were obsessed with, is if you do go on these retreats, which it sounds like you've been, you go and you do your ayahuasca and you're on a WhatsApp group, and for 6 weeks after you're talking every day, and then all of a sudden you're back at home and like you slowly never talk to those people again, and you have the same family and the same friends and the same job, and so habit change is like very hard. And so there's ideas like if you have a local place you can go to weekly to create practice and ritual, in a similar way to like religion works in some ways, that like change would be easier to create. So it was kind of like top of funnel for finding transformation, and then a place to like can be your journey, really, whatever journey that might be, on this like Othership. So I think that's why you feel it, is because we're not like, oh, this brand hired us to go and like make it transformational. Like the experience itself was meant to be that. It was never really a hot and cold space. So it wasn't like, it was like, how do we create friendships for people that aren't drinking, create emotional experiences for them? Like that's what everything was designed around from the
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I feel like you got questions.
I
can
do.
feel
I
them
mean,
percolating.
there's so much to unpack, and there's so much to talk about, which I really, personally am just so intrigued because I've experienced it, and I love that through kind of a Trojan horse, which makes so much sense and I think is so smart. You're looking to create this, but it feels like what you're doing isn't like, okay, well, we want to have a, nationwide chain and we want to do this. It's bigger than that, right? It's clearly bigger than that. It's a movement. It's whatever the hell you want to call it. But like it is like as big picture as you can see it, 100 years from now, when people look back and they go, oh, Othership is this, what is it?
I think the most exciting thing would be if like, exercise 20 years, like pre-SoulCycle was like Gold's Gym and was like predominantly male and for athletes. And so it's like either steroid bodybuilders or athletes. And now exercise is like for everyone, there's like whatever boutique fitness classes you want to do. There's run clubs. There's all like the idea that like, hey, I should be moving my body. It's like the fact that, in 2002, my dad's generation would be like, what are you talking about? So that is like commonplace now.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to see the same thing happen for emotional health. So the idea that like once a week you go into a class like this and you practice gratitude or loving kindness or feelings of confidence, you are like screaming in a group, you have a place where you can share. So like men's and women's circles are quite popular in some places, but still very fringe. And so for most people, like, less than one close friend to share their issues with, they're like on social media all day seeing this fake life. And so where do you go to be a human? And so I would love if like everyone once a week goes, feels into their emotions, then has a place to share, get something off their chest, be heard by other humans, then hear a few other empathetic stories. So like my favorite part, every class has this share moment at the end, which actually, if you think about it before this, it's insane. If I said like, hey, you're going to go to the fitness class and we're going to wait for 10 minutes at the end of the class and let people share super vulnerable stuff. Like, that comes from group therapy and psychedelics, but that wasn't like a consumer product. And when we did it at first, my friends, even male friends, are like, dude, bro, what's this share bullshit, and like, fuck off. I don't care. Like, yeah, this is important. And you go and you might hear something like, I just went through a really bad breakup. I haven't felt confident in 3 weeks, and like going through this ice bath with somebody else, this was the first time. And they'll say something like that. And so I think a world where people feel there's like a space where they can be heard, and even if it's strangers, is sometimes more powerful because you're not going to be judged. You just want to be witnessed, which is like what therapy is.
Yeah.
So I think that is like the big goal, is that like these kind of classes, the mainstream person does them and is able to better understand the importance of regulating their emotions. And like the big goal would be like, 200 million people do this thing, and it just becomes commonplace that it's like part of your weekly routine. So that's what I want to build.
I love that. I think, I wrote a little bit about like, cause I don't know, I'm sure you've read the Othership like gets like a lot of tech bros like come in New York. And I was like, dude, like, honestly, I think this says more about tech bros than it says about Othership. Like, this doesn't say anything about that. They're not attracting, going out there trying to get tech bros to come in. Tech bros need emotional places where they can be vulnerable and have feelings and feel heard and have like, community, like all of the rest of us, and probably maybe sometimes more, because quite frankly, I've met a lot of them that really need it. And it's, yeah, like I'd love to kind of, what's your experience with that? Like you sort of talked about it with your friends, like, hey dude, but like, is that something that you're hearing? Like, is that a big part of your community? And are you kind of like, are you single-handedly changing the finance industry? Because it sounds like you might be.
Well, it's just like you want it. So I have a couple comments on that. So one is like, I would go to these retreats and you do them and it's like, oh my God, during COVID, there was probably like 15 people that came into Othership and we're going to go to Costa Rica and open a retreat there. And that's what you want to do in this beautiful space and like be in nature. But the reality is where people need this is in New York. It's like the hardest city to live in the world. The struggle is real. The chaos is real. It is intense. And that's where people need emotional work. And that's just where, whatever you can call them, finance tech bros, where they live. That's the majority of the population in like the Flatiron district. So it's like, yeah, of course, those people are going to come in. We want them to come in. Like, we want this to be a space for somebody to come in and like go to a class and feel like, wow, I never knew that was even possible. And like some of our earliest customers are my friends. I actually was an investment banker out of school. Some of my friends are in finance and we'd be doing these classes and they'd be crying. Like, I don't spend enough time with my daughter. It's like, wow, can't believe you're even telling me this right now. Like, that's amazing. So I think that's awesome. And the other really cool thing is like boutique fitness traditionally is, 80, 90, 95% women in a Pilates yoga studio. And so we're 60% women, 40% men, which is like really awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Personally, I also, whatever media says, like whatever press is good press, and they'll just say like the most salacious headlines. So like our customer base isn't predominantly tech bros, like it's predominantly women. But I think there is like a space for all. And then we do have these classes called Space for Men, which are awesome, and they're also crazy because we've had Space for Women forever. And we put out this post recently on like Space for Men, and it got like 900 likes. And some people were commenting like, oh my God, another Space for Men, just what this world needs, like super controversial. And I was like, hey, we also have Space for Women. And it's just like a place for men to talk and share feelings. I think that's like cool. Those, the tech bros and the Space for Men and stuff can be pretty controversial, but we'll lean into it. Like, that's a space for all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
we
think
need
that's what
that.
I loved about it. Yeah. Like we were in there and there was like, I feel like there was every walk of life in there. Like,
Mhm.
and that's what was so nice about it. Whereas like often when I go to a yoga studio, like it's basically like all my friends that I always am exposed to on a daily basis, or like, you know, a certain type of very fit female, like, you know, it's very narrow. So I personally thought that was great. Like I really enjoyed it, and no vibes at all of bad tech bros. So many questions. I wanted to know, like, so you've kind of talked about a few of your personal challenges, but like from a perspective of a brand, like you guys are growing fast. I get the impression you're growing fast. Maybe you'll tell me you're not. But like, what are the sort of the challenges that you're kind of up against, and like, how are you kind of tackling that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. So one, brick and mortar businesses are just extremely complex. Nobody has ever done large scale 64, 70, 80 people in a sauna at once doing classes. So there was no model to really pull from. You know, the very first one we opened during COVID, we signed the lease, and our landlord, we'd worked with before for nightclubs, and he was just like, this will never work. Like, I don't even know what you guys are talking about. People in the first PR were like, this is disgusting. Nobody will ever group sauna again. So there was definitely like, she doesn't know what this thing was at all. So we had to educate every customer starting in kind of 2020 on like what an ice bath is, what emotional work is. And like, luckily, ice baths and saunas have just exploded in popularity because every podcast host is like, the health benefits are just becoming clear. Then also, there's been this huge movement away from drinking. So people looking for things to do at night that aren't drinking based. So we've really benefited from those waves. And a third wave, which we haven't benefited from yet, which we're educating people, is just this idea that like emotional work is important. So that's the hardest one, is like people will come for an event and we'll have like our reviews, our scores are off the charts. But then like, is this part of your weekly routine? And it's tough for us. Like the conversion is okay, but it's not as good as it is if you go to Barry's. You probably already work out. You're looking for a workout space. And so for this, it's almost more like a restaurant where you go for the novelty and have a great time, but then it's not part of your routine. So I just think there's so much education that needs to be done. And the analogy, I think, is kind of like, you know, in the 90s, there was like Folgers and then Starbucks. And every year it's like, oh my God, there's so much competition, but there's just more and more coffee shops, more and more coffee drinkers. And I think if you look at Europe, where there's 7,000 bathing establishments, like, or Finland, where there's like more saunas than people, there's just so much further to go. But it's just hard to educate people ourselves. Like, we don't have a huge marketing budget, and it's growing, but it's still like so small. On the size of New York, there's like 6 or 7 places between Manhattan and Brooklyn, 11 million people. You know, realistically, if people start taking meetings here and socializing, you know, you could see similar to a number of restaurants. I think that's hard. It's just the education of the customer. And obviously this stuff happens on Instagram, is popular and on podcasts, but like the average customer getting them to come frequently, there's like a long road there. And then just the complexity of the builds. Like we, you know, we had this one little one open in Toronto and that we self-funded, just took the leap of faith, as I mentioned, in COVID, and then said like, okay, it's clear that this product is amazing. The reviews are off the charts. There's nothing like this. We traveled all around the US, and people would come and said like, hey, there's nothing like this. You should open in the US. So we looked at a bunch of markets, chose New York, and we signed 3 leases at the same time for a double the size unit. Looking back, like, it was great. You know, now we're about to launch Williamsburg, and so we made it through. But, you know, what I knew then and what I know now about construction, like, you know, double the time, 2.5 times the budget that we thought. We ran out of money. We had to borrow money, leverage our houses, put them up. We put literally everything we have into this. We had to move to New York and live there for 6 months in a house with our team of 12 in like a 6-bedroom house, being in the space every single day. We couldn't figure out the permitting. The ice baths that we use in Toronto were illegal. We signed a lease, and we have a co-ed changing experience in Toronto. And the idea was that like, if you come with your partner or your group, you don't have to split. And I never liked being at big spas where I would always go with my wife and we'd split, and then you kind of have to find each other on the inside. And just subtly, it's like a feeling of loneliness immediately in the experience. I hated that. So in Toronto, it's like, it kind of desexualizes everything. It makes it feel more European, where, you know, in Europe, it's just naked and the change rooms are co-ed. And so we have that in Toronto, which was really like revolutionary and kind of one of the only places in Toronto to have that. Changing stalls so you're not naked, but like, you know, your lockers are together. And so we signed this lease in New York and find out that is illegal after we'd already signed the lease. So totally,
Of course.
our floor
Of course
plan,
it is. Wow.
you know, exploded our costs because we had to rent the basement and like dig into the floor to like put the structurally like hang the pools into the basement. So just tons of problems with construction and permitting that weren't expected, trying to grow, I think, quickly. It's a tough balance on wanting to create, like every single brand element in that space we own. So even in retail, we don't sell anyone else's products. In our, the signature scent, we actually make by hand in the space with like a different essential oils and dipping them in incense. And then the shampoo, the conditioner, the body wash, we want them to match the smells of the ice balls in our signature scent. So we have 5 different signature scents. All our products are based on our signature scent. The sauna hats, the merch, the water bottles, everything is like a bathing experience item that we've designed from scratch. Every song on every playlist is handpicked by my co-founder. So anyone can nominate a song, but he picks each song. And so we have 7 different playlists, very specific. Every class, there's no one who did this before us. So we have like a 200-hour training of guides just to get started. And then there's 8 levels they progress through: navigator, magic maker, alchemist, otherworldly. And they progress with like increase in skills, basically, in training. And so every class, it's not like those are, I show up and I do a yoga class. It's a legit performance where the music is perfectly. So my partner's also a producer and composer. And so he makes the music, he'll pull songs, cut them together perfectly. So when you're on the breath hold, like some of the breath holds are built in to the audio. So we really want it to feel from start to finish like it is a performance. And just that level of detail, even like the sandwich board up front was custom designed by my wife. The receipts that you get are like custom coded. So it's not the normal billing system receipts. So it just are really like, all of us are anal about product, and we just are huge believers in like every detail counts. And some don't. So some is a waste of time, but you don't know which ones count and which ones don't. So you just have to have that level of like maniacal focus to create something that people love. I think like that level of care, because that goes down to the team of how much they care as well. So I think having that and like trying to deliver that kind of experience over and over while also growing is just like really challenging. And you might have went, and like I even heard on that when you were talking about it, you just mentioned the change rooms. I'm like, the change rooms experience kind of starts after. And the change rooms are designed that way because we couldn't do the co-ed, so we didn't have enough space. And it's like, it's not something that can be fixed. And it just hurts my soul every time people like, that's where we get the complaints. And so it's like, fuck, like it's really hard. Like with brick and mortar, like you sign a lease, you built it, it's built. And then you don't know like until you see bodies moving through space, like how much space you need. So every space gets better and better. But those are just some of the challenges. Like the capital expenditures are like astronomical for, the engineering you need to move 600, 700, 800 bodies a day on the weekend through a space like that. And then, requires 70 people, the training of the front desk, the cleaners. If one cleaner doesn't show up for work, he can ruin the entire space. It can make it like, towels end up everywhere, cups end up everywhere. So like, it's kind of like running a 5-star restaurant, but you're running it from 5 a.m. until 1 a.m. So just that operationally is like pretty intense. So that's just like a little bit about some.
Yeah.
It's hard, but
yeah.
we care like so much, so it's worth it.
You can tell.
Somebody have this experience, like every time it blows my mind.
As people who spend a lot of time thinking about brand experiences, you can know that we literally were like walking through the space and we're like, that was so thoughtful. That moment was so thoughtful. So I will say, like, at least from my perspective, the appreciation for the level of detail that you guys have gone through, like we talked about, even just the towels and the 2 different ways, and like, it is really well done. So like, kudos to you guys, because that is very, very difficult for brands to maintain that, and especially as you scale. But like, if you have it in the beginning, it's easier to scale with it than it is to recreate, like to create that as you go. One question I have is like, so I was talking to Kirsten and I was like, how do they get so magical so quickly? And like, and you've kind of given us that, but like, if somebody had to kind of like take your secret sauce of magic, like what do you think it is that makes you guys think the way you do, act the way you do? Like what piece of advice would you say, like, don't overlook?
Well, I think there's one like really interesting, like hard copyable, impossible to copy. Is just like, hey, we created this. So it's like, there's one person that created it from scratch. And so, when we did it, it wasn't a business. It's just like, hey, can we make this thing? And so there's so much like passion and interest there. Like the app how that started was just us making breathworks for our friends during COVID on Zoom. And then we just had so much fun. Like we'd do that on Friday nights because we didn't drink. And then, we put out a Kajabi course, and the course was just like, oh, would people do this? And that did 100K in sales. And so we built our app, and all the content on the app we made ourselves because we think it's fun. And so like we'll go up to my, co-founder's cottage and create all this amazing programming just because we like it. So it's like, if you want to come in and compete or you want to build something, I just think about this all day long. It's kind of all I care about. And so I'm thinking about how to make it better, 12 hours a day because I want to. And so I think for people who are wanting to do something, if that's like the level of obsession you have with making your product, or if you're curious, that's like such a good sign because that's what makes something excellent. And then I think having 5 of us, like we have such different skills. So I was always obsessed with building community. And like I used to, own a nightclub. I always was like going out. I love being around people. I'm very extroverted. I love bringing people together, connecting them. Like it gives me joy. So it was almost like being a nightclub promoter opening in New York. Like I had personally 18,000 people I invited to the space in New York. I've met probably over 10,000 people personally over the last 6 years that I've had like individual conversations or sweats with. I just get a lot of energy from that. So that's how like the community has kind of started. We have WhatsApp groups for each space that are in like the, 700 people where they like book dinners around. They'll like go to class and be like, oh, let's all go for dinner tonight. And so I've always been in community. I did that at Ethereum before. Then my partner, Harry and Amanda, are like world-class facilitators. He was like, went to architect school and is a musician. She's extremely organized. The two of them combined, a lot of times creatives, they kind of balance each other out. And so a lot of times creatives are like have amazing ideas, but then are not organized. And so now between the two of them, they have like all the creativity plus the ability, like they manage over 100 guides now, which is like extremely challenging. My partner Emily is like the brand guy. Like she's incredible and, built our app, has done all our branding, designs the emails from scratch, like has the detail. And then my partner Miles is like behind the scenes doing all the construction. And so I just think there's 5 of us all with our own skills. And it just brings a lot of like, some people are afraid of many co-founders, but it brings this energy to the space of like, there's always a co-founder around sharing like why we do this, why we're excited about it. And it brings such an energy to the team. So I think if you have like a lot of co-founder passion for like what you're doing and obsession, no matter what you do, that alone is like, it's such an advantage. And then when there's 5 of us, it really like spreads. So I think for people, I think that is the magic. It's just 5 people that care about the experience, like beyond belief. And that's like really hard to copy. I mean, look, people can build nice spaces. That's hard to do. The engineering is tough. But like, yeah, I'm not super worried about like copiers because it's a lot of pain and effort to get here and sacrifice. But for us, it was fun versus sacrifice. That's, hopefully that answers the question.
I mean, I want to dig more into the co-founder portion of it. So so I love the idea first off of, that you're that it's couples and kind of your best friends. Like I really believe and attest to that's the best way to create businesses, right? Are really with people that you believe your best friends. I mean, Chris and I obviously have a couple businesses together, but also, she's one of my best friends and like that trumps all of the other things. And I think then you're really aligned. And for us, like, you kind of are always there to support each other and figure out what up. So my question is within kind of the 5 of you, how do you kind of delegate or say, I'm going to take this, or kind of obviously you have your areas of expertise, but when something comes up, is it like how does that collaboration work? Because it sounds like it really works and it sounds like there's some lessons there.
Yes, it happens over time. And, this wasn't even meant to be a business. So initially there was like more friction. And so we had a coach for the 5 of us, which was helpful. And then we're also like doing all the work together. But yeah, like, it's not easy and it never will be with 5 people. So the benefits are immense if you can harness it. And now we've worked together long enough where we know whose skills are what. But at first it was challenging. What's worked really well is that like everyone is doing a good job. And I can see if there's performance issues, it won't work. And so you just have to be careful because I've also had partnerships which didn't work because somebody's not pulling their weight. So luckily here, everybody has found their expertise and is masterful at that thing. But to get there was challenging because, at first there was like a even equity split, but that didn't make sense as time went on. And so that's obviously contentious because everybody has a sense of what they're worth. And so there's just hard conversations that have to be had. And there's like resentment that builds up over time. And first couple of years, there were issues there. And now we're on a path where everybody's role is like very clear. Everybody's compensated fairly. And like people are actually masters in what they're doing. So I think, Harry and Amanda created a lot of this programming from scratch and are like legit the best in the world at this and are like irreplaceable. A lot of the magic in the brand has come from them and wouldn't exist. And, my wife, same thing, like irreplaceable. With how she knows like what is the language, and so it's just very clear what role we each have now. And then my partner Miles, same thing. So, he's built up, we're on our 5th build. We've done 500 layouts across the 5 builds. He's managed how many hundreds of construction people across each one. And so you just build trust over time. But, I think it's pretty normal to have hard conversations, resentment. Hey, this isn't fair. And if so, you have to be willing to have a hard convo. And that's tough. And especially as we started, we were all kind of junior managers. So having those hard conversations, you're not used to them. And they create friction. And so, there'll be times when I was just kind of angry in the shower, like this doesn't feel fair, this isn't fair, and be thinking about it. But now we've passed that point. I think that's, that's a part of the founder journey, not really the brand journey, but it's just getting used to having hard conversations with love. And it's kind of like taking an ice bath, you're just like, fuck, I don't want to say this, but it's bothering me. And then you do it, then you feel much better. But it's tough. And I think like if you worked with your partner, one, because we're both respect each, like, if it's a marketing thing, I'm asking my wife and she's telling me what to do. And I'm not like stepping on her toes. Like we have very different roles and I really respect her. So I think it works really well. But I can see if it's not working well, then it would be awful because you also live together and you're a couple. So I think if you make it work, it's like, I'd like to live on the same street as my co-founders and like raise our kids together. And they're like literally my best friends in the world.
That's beautiful.
Chance to work with your friends is like 1 in 1,000. Chance to work with your friends on something you love, like another 1 in 1,000, and then the chance for that to be successful. So I almost like never want to sell this business just because I don't think we could recreate something like again like this. So it's like I'm so grateful for it.
That's beautiful. I love that.
All right. We have some quick fire. Kirsten calls it something else, like rapid fire. And I was like, I think it sounds too militant, so I've changed it to quick fire. But we have some quick fire questions. So the first one is 3 things every brand should do. All
right.
Short answer.
3 things every brand should do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you have to be obsessed with the product and there has to be somebody with the brand who like uses the product, no matter your size, who's just like obsessed. And I think I'm a huge believer. I just posted a quote from Steve Jobs about this, that, market research will only get you so far. And there has to be somebody who's just gut feel. Like there's no like statues of committees, if you ever heard that line. So that's number 1 is like, you just have to be obsessed with the product enough to trust your intuition to create. And so at the end of the day, like we're actually building something new now, which we're going to start talking about next year, but like we're building it for ourselves. We'll talk to customers, but we'll design for ourselves. So that's 1. I think 2 is also like stand for what you believe in and like take a real stance that's like controversial. And so for most brands, the problem isn't, in my mind, like being too controversial. The problem is nobody cares, like you're dealing, like indifference is worse than controversy. And I think that's something people are worried about is like, oh, what are they going to say about me? But like for us, we're just trying to lean in to things that like make us weird, like be like a good idea on that. Not necessarily controversial, but just be the meest me. I've heard that. And so it's like, who am I if I don't conform to society at all? And that's why like we have shares in our classes and like there's no sandals and people will be like, 10%, like that's gross. There's no sandals. And it's like, well, the floor is designed for your feet because we wanted you to feel it. We don't want sandals gunking up your face. So it's not for you, fuck off. And same, like there's no robe. It's an anti-bathhouse experience. So I think, really care, design for yourself, be the meest me in like your brand language. And this is why like founder-led brands, I think, are generally like way more successful, is because they're reflections of them. The line of like Steve Jobs is Apple with 10,000 lives. So I think like don't be afraid to put yourself into the brand and like take a stance. And then the third one is like really care about the customer. Like for me, I've met with 11,000 people or someone who was in a WhatsApp asking for a job. And I spent like at another company and I spent an hour coaching her through her resume and like what to say. And then I helped her put together like a list of like product advice and then sent it to the CEO of that company, like, hey, somebody in our community put this together. And like, it took an hour and a half of my time. I just did that for her to help her get a job, and because I care about the community and like, I really care. And so I think it's, how do you care about your customers? Like, go and talk to them, hang out with them, be friends with them. And I think that one's probably the hardest, or like least likely, especially if you work for a big company. You're like, well, why do I care about the customer? I'm selling this product. But like, empathy for the customer is going to lead to your best ideas. So it's selfish also, it's like helping people, talking to them, understanding them. That'll give you more product ideas. And people know, like, they feel it when they feel, so we never try to send like automated emails with like corporate speak. We try to, even if it's like wrong and vulnerable and the spelling's off, and like, we want to make it feel human when I'm talking to people. So those are the three that just pop to mind right now.
Amazing. Human resonates for sure. What's your one biggest learning? Like, what's the one thing that you would do differently?
Two things come up. One I just think about is we raised money initially at like a really low valuation. And the idea was, kind of, I'd seen a lot of people in tech do this, and you do a party round with all these angels and they help promote your brand. And like, we ended up raising about 10% in that first round at like a stupid low valuation, but also putting some of our own money in. And so for an extra, $700,000 or something, we could have, like, we gave up a massive amount of our company. So that really bothers me. And so it definitely reduced our risk when we started. And when we opened the first one, we didn't know if it was going to be successful. And we're like, oh, at least if it fails, we're only out so much money. So I think like having more belief in yourself when you're starting something. Like, I also would always try, like, I've had so many coaches, founder of SoulCycle and Heyday and all these great companies. And I would always be asking, I have a problem, like, oh, what do I do? And instead of thinking about it, I would ask. At the end of the day, all this stuff is just opinions. And so I've stopped and a lot of times, like, I would feel something and then I would listen to a coach and be like, oh, that's the right thing a business should do. And so now the learning is like, hey, I'm building this thing in a unique way. We're building a movement that no one's ever done. Like, let's just do it from first principles and change stuff and like do it based on how we feel. And all of that stuff comes from like not being confident, from being scarcity mindset of like, I'm going to need this money. It's going to fail. I got to do what people say or I'm not right. And not so much on the product side, because I always felt passionate, but more on like the business side. I felt like, I didn't know. Can I open in New York? I don't know what I'm doing. These people know. And so now I'm stepping into like, fuck off territory. I'm not listening. I'm just going with like what I feel. And a lot of that I learned through listening to Founders podcasts, my favorite podcasts. Shout out to David Senra on the founder side. It's just biographies of great founders. And they all kind of, it starts to give you the confidence that like everyone who started one of these big companies was just a person who didn't know anything. And they like did it and figured it out and learned themselves. And so that'd be the biggest thing, is just continuing to like, okay, learn myself, believe in myself. And I wish I believed in myself more earlier.
Yeah, love that. Well, it sounds like, as we experienced, the brand is very pure and you're creating everything under the Othership brand. But if you were to collaborate with one brand, what brand would it be and why?
Well, it's pretty crazy because you sent me this question and one of the brands I thought about just happened in between when I saw it, and now we are collaborating with them, and it happened, and I was like, no fucking way. And so I think there's two.
How it happens.
Yeah, so I think there's like two types of collabs that we want as I thought about it. And so one is like, we're bringing in world-class programmers into our space to help level up our emotional programming. So an example might be like an Esther Perel, and we do some co-programming together around our couples class. So they're actual people that are experts in like emotional health or burnout, somebody like an Andrew Huberman on like a sauna stack that we put together. So they're people that are Deepak Chopra, like some people in those realms that are experts. Like Mel Robbins recently came in, huge fan. Like, she invited us, to her show, and we hung out with her, and she was just so kind. She did a couple classes, and so like collaborating on a class with her would be amazing. So that's one.
Yeah, she's great.
Side of things. And then the other side of things that I'd love to is take our programming and put it in places that we really respect as a way to sort of, merge brand credibility for what we're doing, that we're not Sauna Nice Best Place. We are like building emotional health and wellness. And so on that side of things, the two brands that I have the most respect for are Canyon Ranch, who's like 54 years in business, like the OG, doing wellness before there was even a term for it, like just out of heart family business has been done. Really respect things that last a long long time. Like for me, that's like, you know, if your business has been in 40, 50 years, it's like, wow, that's so different than like, I'm going to build this tech company in 5 years and sell it to private equity. I think like real brands, you know, Whole Foods is 45 years old. Equinox is like 35, 40 years old. It takes a really long time. Canyon Ranch is one, and then the other is Amon. Amon's way out of my price range personally, but I splurged, and my wife and I went and stayed at the New York location, and they gave us a deal. I was just like blown away by the hospitality. Like we came back from a show, and they had petals, flower petals all over the floor, little candles leading up to the bed, these like little meditation bracelets. So doing stuff with Amon or Canyon Ranch with our facilitation would be great. And so since we talked, we actually got in touch with Canyon Ranch. I'm going to a panel with them, and we're going to be designing a number of talks with their facilitators at our space. So it kind of hits both of those. So yeah,
Love that.
those are brands that I love.
Amazing. It's all happening. Mel Robbins, Canyon Ranch, can't get better. One word that sums up your brand.
Transformation.
Love it. I think that's
So good.
true. Thank you so much for coming on here and being so vulnerable and sharing so much with us, and really like appreciate it. It was exciting, and I hope everyone learns from it. And if there's something you learned in the podcast today, please drop it. Or if you have a question for Robbie, drop it in the comments. And yeah, thank you.
Yes. And if you are anywhere near New York, go experience Othership. And I hope you come to LA Othership soon, but definitely go and experience it and let us know. Thank you, Robbie.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was fun.
So much insight, so many learnings.
Yeah. And we've decided that when we do these amazing interviews, I feel like the first thing that we do is we get on Slack or like come off of the Zoom or Riverside or whatever. And we're like, what was that? What was your takeaway? What was the thing that you thought was most important about it? And then we can't have another podcast, right? Like that would be a little extra. You and I could, but like maybe no one would listen. So what we're going to do at the end of these interviews is kind of like discuss what we learned, what we took away, how we might think about it in different categories, all the stuff that we do in the letter. And yeah, let us know what you think of this segment. And yeah, we're learning as we go. So appreciate any feedback.
For sure. We would love to hear what you think, but we're definitely trying to pull out the nuggets, and there were many that you can use for your brand, for your company going forward. All right.
Yeah.
Give me the first.
Well, the first one for me, and I think, you know, this is literally what I got off like the podcast and told you right before we started recording this, is that one of the things that I think is so fundamental about what they're doing is so different to what many companies do, is that they're really thinking about their business in a completely different way. Like if they were thinking of themselves as a recovery business, right, which so many of these, like we've gone to a bunch, and they can be really good. And I think that they can be an advantage to thinking about that from like a day-to-day use, right? Like he was talking about like, how do we get people to come back? And like when it's something simple like that, sometimes it is easier. But if they were thinking that way, they would be thinking, how do we add more saunas? Like, how do we make more ice baths in this floor plan? Like they would not have ever created or continued to create or develop the things that they are developing, which are so much beyond the recovery aspects. So you barely heard Robbie talk about the cold plunges, like barely heard him talk about the saunas. Like that's not the focus of their business. And that is what makes their business so different. And so that to me is the thing that if I were listening to this and thinking about that, it's like they aren't thinking in category. They are thinking completely differently to their business.
Totally. It's a perfect example of a challenger brand. Perfect example. And I think one of the things that I loved is obviously what they're creating is so heartfelt and so authentic, but they're smart enough to want to make it accessible and to really want to hit mass. That I loved how he said that they're really a Trojan horse, and they're making sure that it doesn't go too woo-woo, it doesn't go too spiritual, that it feels accessible so that everybody can go and really experience wellness, experience emotional healing, experience cold plunges, contrast therapy, kind of really truly experience that. And they're really smart in in not going too extreme one way or the other, but still maintaining a brand that you really feel something. You get their perspective. It feels bold. It feels like you're a part of something. It doesn't feel like everything to everybody. And I think that can be a really hard line to balance.
It's such a hard line. Like, I think, like, I've seen so many people who are like, oh, like, how could you be 70, 40 people in a sauna? Ick. And I'm like, you and I was like, can we go be 40 people in a sauna? Like, can I, like, do you want to come do this at 8 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday? So I think, like, not being everything to everyone, but being, like, really passionate. And I think he's right about, like, if you build for yourself, and that's harder to do. Like, obviously, if you're running a retail business, like, if you're running, like, that's a harder lesson to take away. But I still think the fundamentals are there, of, like, thinking differently, and doing it with passion.
Yeah, totally. And I loved kind of the insight from the founder led perspective and the founder brand, that and I think we hear this from so many founders, when they really lean, and we coach this, when they really lean into what they know and what they know the brand to be and why they started it and kind of all of those parts and pieces, that's where the magic really happens. Dressings were a perfect example. He knew that it wasn't going to be, the highlight of the experience, but really learning that when you really lean into what you you can hear wisdom from other people, you can hear insights from other people, but when you really lean into because why you created this experience in the first place and kind of furthering that, that's really when beautiful things happen.
Yeah. I'd say, like, what do you think is, like, if you were a retail brand, like you're, I don't know, a menswear brand, like, what do you take away from that conversation? Like, what would you translate?
Oh, I mean, I think it was so interesting, really understanding how they're opening up to the men's market, the bro market, whatever we want to call that, and being really relevant. I think it's about really understanding the experience that you can offer, what people need, even if they don't know that they need it or they haven't yet identified that they need it, and then creating the brand, creating the experience in a way that's accessible and compelling to them. I think the example that he used of at first, his male friends were saying, like, I don't want to share at the end. That's lame, bro. Like, I don't want to do that. And yet that's where so much of kind of that personal experience can really happen, and that emotional healing can really happen, and really being able to lean into that. So I think he didn't do that in leading with it. Hey, you're going to come to this ice bath and you're going to share. That's kind of, you bring that in after. So it is kind of, again, that Trojan horse, but really understanding what your customer needs and then being able to present the brand and present the experience in a way that's gonna hit and be relevant to then get them in to enjoy whatever the experience is, whatever the brand is.
I love that.
What do you think?
That's not what I thought you were going to say. Because I've heard your soapboxes a few times, so I thought you were going to go after the customer service aspect, like the detail of, like, kind of. I know that when we've gone into retail experience and they bring out a shirt and it's, like, still in the plastic bag, like, Kirsten will, like, throw that shirt on the floor and walk right out.
It's crazy.
Like, she doesn't actually do that, but her mind does that. She's already done, like, she's not there, and not everyone is, so passionate about the plastic bags, but I think that it is, like, we went to Jacquemus when we were in London, and I'm going to write about that, or will have written about that by the time this comes out, probably. But it, when you went in there, everything felt really intentional, right? Like, somebody was guiding
everything.
Yeah, like, someone, like, greeted you, like, they knew we weren't going to buy anything. We were, like, basically like, hey, we're here to take content. And they still treated us like they ran us through, they gave us a spiel, they told us about, like, the personal stories. They, like, really knew their talking points. They didn't feel canned, but they were canned. I think that, like, so many retailers and so many businesses in general, like, really don't, like, put enough effort into, and it's hard in retail because people are like, oh, like, the turnover, da 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 da. But I actually think when you invest in your team, like you can tell that the Othership people, like, they feel really good about where they're working. They're proud of what they're doing. And it seems like they're really like they're giving them the 200 hours of training. They've got these levels, like they're really thinking about that. And like so few retail businesses, for example, like think that way at all. Like they're just like, you're like a throwaway piece, and like everybody feels it. And it's such a missing thing for brands for me.
For sure. And I think Jacquemus is the perfect example. And I think we talked about it and wrote about it previously. It's the intentionality and the expectation of the client, of your customer, right? It's saying they're going to be great, not they're going to make a mess in the dressing room and do this. That they're going to really be this amazing tech bro, whatever it's going to be, and they're going to lean into this. And it's kind of setting that expectation, and then they're really dialing in the experience. I loved what Robbie said as far as everything. We're making sure that everything that everything matters, and that every detail, and they're being a bit obsessive about it, which I personally and my OCD loves, because as he said, you don't know necessarily what's going to matter to somebody. And I think that's true. Something that matters to me might not matter to Dave, for example, and vice versa. I think it's really about creating this experience because it's going to make a difference and it's going to hit differently. And I think the other thing on that, which they're clearly doing, is their kind of employee training, their team training and inspiration. The fact that they send them kind of a story every single day. They're doing things that we obviously experience, that they're doing something right, and being really thoughtful about that. Not just saying like, oh, okay, this employee can work this shift from blah, 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 blah. They're really making sure that employee, that team member is creating the experience, and they're putting in the time and putting in the detail and sharing the stories because they know that matters. And I think any brand can take that away.
Yeah. And then the last thing I would say is a lesson that we learned from our friend Gillet, who I would say is like always kind of like one of my, like, if you could be anybody running a business, you should be Gillet. And she was obsessed with talking to customers. Like, and I think, I will say, I think in Robbie's world, probably talking to a customer and hanging out with a customer and like getting like chilling with them is a lot easier than it is for most brands. Like Gillet was building her, like beauty brand, and like that was harder. Like she had to call people and she had to have conversations with them, and like, but she really did that. Like I was her customer. I had many conversations with her where I told her like what I did and didn't like about her product, and like people will be very honest with you. But like so many businesses, like I think like make a lot of assumptions, or they do a lot of data, like, and it's like the data, and it's like, have you ever spoken to, like, there's like 5 or 6 people that like might tell you more than the thousands of bits of little data that you have aren't really necessarily like the thing that you need to hear.
I thought the exact same thing, and I thought of Gillet when he said that. And I think you bring up such an important point. And I think so many brands and companies go to like, well, let's research, let's do a focus group. That's different. And that can be valid too, but that's different than actually talking to a customer and actually kind of getting, which is exactly what Gillet did and exactly what Robbie's doing. And I agree, it's easier in that format, but I think every brand can figure out. And Gillet, I think it wasn't easy, and she had to go and track down the customer and call them and make time, and who wants to get a phone call, but she did it. And so I think actually speaking to your customer and really connecting with them is very different and very important. And I think that's a great lesson and great takeaway. And on that note, I would love to hear what people think about this.
Yeah. What was your takeaway? What was the thing that you thought was helpful, or what didn't you agree with? Like, like I there wasn't much I didn't agree with, quite honestly, but that might have been why I invited Robbie on the podcast, because I was like, I think he's going to be really fun to talk to. But yeah, if you didn't agree with something, let us know. Always good.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. What else?
Opinions matter, and share it with a friend. Give the algorithm a little love. You're enjoying it.
Yes. And again, let us know how you feel about this segment. We want to learn too, and we appreciate all your feedback.
Amazing. Enjoy.
Bye.
That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.